Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome. If you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do, I cover true crime cases, and all the cases that I cover are more on the vintage side. They're all basically 20 years or older, so if that's something you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, it looks like this, and stay a while. Today's case, we're going to be discussing Buffalo Cave John Doe, which if you've never heard of Buffalo Cave John Doe, it is basically the case of the oldest doe who has ever been identified. I know this video isn't a super long one, but trust me, it's a very interesting story. I'm gonna stop babbling, I wanna get right into it. So with all that being said, let's get right into the case. So I know the last case that I discussed on my channel, the case of Diane Dye, took place in 1979. This case also took place in 1979. So again, we're going to be time traveling back to 1979. On August 26th of the year 1979, on a warm summer day in Idaho, a family was searching for arrowheads. They decided to head to the Civil Defense Caves located in Du Bois, Idaho. According to Rexburg.com, the Civil Defense Caves are large tubes formed from lava that snaked underground for thousands of feet. Because of the insulating qualities of lava, the interior of caves are cold even on the hottest days of the summer. There is usually ice at the entrance to the cave, so be sure to bring jackets and good footwear along with flashlights. Now this next part, I have my paper right here, I have my script. I have to read this next part for you all. According to Rexburg.com, still same source, the caves get their names from the Cold War era when caves were valuable in eyes of civil defense because they could be used for several different purposes, including storage of materials, natural bomb shelters, and military prisons. Okay. Even though the civil defense caves were never really used for defense, nor was the idea really that practical, it literally says on the website, it's still a fun place to go and pretend that a nuke is going off outside. I don't personally think that's very fun, but like each to their own. Well, this family was exploring a cave called Buffalo Cave, which is in the state's Civil Defense Caves. They discovered something very terrifying, a discovery that they would never forget. They stumbled upon a burlap sack that was buried in a shallow grave. They realized quickly something was in the sack, so they decided to peek inside. It was the torso of a man, just the torso, no arms or legs or even a head. The torso was wearing a white button-up shirt with blue pinstripes and a maroon-colored sweater. Police were obviously notified and they took it from there, but at this time, there was nothing much found out about who this torso could have belonged to or even how long it had been there. Well, over 11 years later, on March 30th of 1991, an 11-year-old girl was exploring Buffalo Cave when she stumbled across more remains of the unknown man. She found a mummified hand partially buried in the dirt. Authorities were notified immediately and did an excavation of the cave. This is when they located an arm and two legs. These limbs were also wrapped in burlap. Because there was no head at the time, they really did not think they would ever be able to identify him. And because they weren't able to identify him, he was classified as a John Doe, the Buffalo Cave John Doe to be exact. And based on how they found his remains, he was definitely a homicide victim. Of course, back in the early 90s, forensic technology was nowhere near where it is in today's time, but forensic researchers estimated the John Doe's age to be around 40 years when he was murdered, and that he was possibly from European descent. They also guessed originally that his body may have been there for 6 months, up to possibly 5 years or more than 5 years. And trust me, we'll get there eventually in this video, but it is a lot longer than 5 years. People in the area became fascinated by the tale and the mystery surrounding this unknown homicide victim. So many people traveled long distances to Buffalo Cave in the attempt to locate more clues, especially hoping to find his lost head. I'm not trying to be super cliche, but tell me that this doesn't sound like a story you would tell around a campfire. Many volunteers and anthropology students from Idaho State University searched the cave, but no other remains have ever been found still to this day, just the ones from 1979 and 1991. Anthropology students from Idaho State University were so insanely involved in the case that in the year 2015, the Clark County Sheriff's Department called on them to help identify the man after all these years. One of the main anthropology students involved was Kyra Stull. Kyra was an assistant professor of anthropology and also a forensic anthropologist, and she led her team to help discover who this man was. She said in 2015, "If we can help identify the remains, we have the chance to solve a mystery, to help provide justice, and to possibly help a family find closure." They tried to identify the man for a few years on their own, but were never able to, so they decided in 2019 to reach out to the DNA Doe Project for help. We've discussed the DNA Doe Project many times before. They are a nonprofit organization that uses genetic genealogy to help identify John and Jane Does, just like this one. According to USA Today, a sample of the remains were analyzed by technology company Othram, and DNA Doe Project researchers were able to build out a family tree using forensic genealogy and discover the identity of the body. The victim's name was confirmed by law enforcement officials, police records, and via comparison with a living grandchild. When they started this family tree, they found a connection to who would be one of the victim's grandfathers. This grandfather of his was actually a polygamist, and he had 4 wives. So this family tree was huge. There were tons of cousins, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces. It was a big family tree. But one individual in this family tree stuck out to them as they kept eliminating candidates. They went to this individual's grave and found a gravestone, but there was no body under this stone. The gravestone was simply a cenotaph, a stone to remember the person, but not marking where they actually lie. They found this individual's 87-year-old grandson living in California. They did a DNA test and it was a match. Over 40 years after they discovered his torso, his identity was discovered. I'm so sorry to burst everyone's bubble that the oldest Doe case that was ever solved, the person was not a good person. This is a composite sketch done of the victim. Buffalo Cave John Doe was Joseph Henry Lovelace, who was born on December 3rd, 1870 in Payson, Utah, to parents Sarah Jane Scriggins and Joseph Jackson Scriggins. His mother was originally from Massachusetts and his father was originally from Indiana. Both of his parents were pioneers with the Latter-day Saint movement and settled down in Utah. Not a lot is known about Joseph Henry Lovelace's life, but for how old this story is, I'm surprised that we know this much. We do know that he was known as a bootlegger and a counterfeiter. In the year 1899, Lovelace married a woman named Harriet Jane Savage in Salt Lake City, Utah, and they went on to have 1 daughter. They were divorced, though, about 5 years after the marriage in the year 1904. By August of that next year in 1905, Lovelace was living in Idaho and he went on to marry a woman named Agnes Octavia Caldwell. I genuinely really like the name Octavia, but anyways. Between the years of 1906 and 1913, the couple had 4 children. Now this is where this story gets wild. On May 6th of the year 1916, Agnes Lovelace was brutally murdered with an axe in the middle of the night in a tent that she was sharing with her husband. And yes, the children were there that night, and her head was nearly severed from her body. That's how intense this was. Keep in mind that when it comes to the information about this case, the original researchers on it, they were basically going off of old newspapers, so just keep that in mind. Reports at the time identified her murderer as Charles Smith. Well, Charles Smith was simply one of Joseph Henry Lovelace's aliases. His main aliases were Henry Lovelace, Charles Smith, Walter Currens, and Walter Cairns. So he murdered his wife. He was arrested and sent to jail, and this was not his first trip to the big house. He actually escaped twice from jail in the year 1914, and after his second escape, authorities basically just let him go. I do have to mention that at Agnes's funeral, one of her children were quoted saying, "Papa never stayed in jail very long, and he'll soon be out." And they weren't wrong, because on May 18th, he escaped. Yep, he broke out of St. Anthony jail using a saw blade that he had stuffed in his shoe. Not much is really known after that, where he went, who he came in contact with. We just know that he wound up a dismembered body in a cave, and forensic researchers believe he did in fact die in the same year of 1916, at about 45 to 46 years of age. Strangely enough, the clothing found with his body was the same exact clothing he was described wearing in his wanted poster that was posted after his escape from jail. They didn't have a photo of him on this poster. He was just described wearing a light-colored hat, brown coat, red sweater, and blue overalls over black trousers. Now, the overall cause of death is completely unknown. They don't know if he was strangled, if he was stabbed, if he was shot. They have no idea. But they do know that his body was dismembered using multiple sharp tools. But most researchers who look into this case, and also professionals who worked on this case, do think that the person responsible was either somebody who lived in town, a townsperson, who came across him, knew what he did, and, took justice into their own hands, or maybe it was somebody who was related to Agnes. People in the area were immediately notified through the newspaper that this man escaped, so I can guarantee that people did go out looking for him, or better yet, hunting for him. According to connectingdirectors.com, following the murder of their mother, Agnes and Lovelace's two youngest sons, Edison and Claude, went to live with Agnes's parents in Soda Springs, Idaho. Edison took his grandparents' last name of Caldwell and died in 1965. Claude Henry Lovelace died in 1964. Their half-sister, Thelma Lovelace Wing, died in 1972, 7 years before her father's torso was discovered in the Idaho cave. A headstone in the Lovelace family plot in Utah bears the name Joseph Henry and a birth year of 1870. The year of death is still blank. Now, I did find one interesting newspaper article from February 27, 1936, regarding Lovelace's daughter from his first marriage, and at this time she was looking for him. It says, Nevada woman asks for help in locating father. A letter forwarded to the courier from the Secretary of State's office contains a plea for assistance from Mrs. Thelma Wing of Reno, Nevada, who is seeking to locate her father, Joseph Henry Lovelace, thought to be living in Jackson Hole. Mrs. Wing states that her mother and father were divorced 3 months before she was born. I want to find him so much, she said. My mother has been dead for 11 years. I know I should have tried to find him before this, but I was just neglected. My father has never looked for me that I know of, but I can understand this. But if you would kindly help me, if you can, I would be grateful. She asked that tax records be checked to determine whether her father's name was on the rolls. I do genuinely find this part really sad because she was from his first marriage. She never really knew her father, and she went her whole life wondering where he may have been. She started searching for him almost 20 years after he died, and she had no idea how he died or the kind of person that he was. She didn't really know any of his backstory, and honestly, maybe it's better that she didn't. I rarely ever say this when it comes to a true crime case, but sometimes ignorance is bliss, that she didn't find out the type of person that her father was. Of course, there were newspaper articles back then that she could have come across, but it's not the same way it is in today's time, and she was from a different area. Chances are she never knew anything that happened. She may have never known that he murdered his second wife. After Buffalo Cave John Doe's identity was discovered and the story got out and everybody was discovering more about his backstory and who he was, of course, all of this was told to his descendants. And I'm sure that that kind of ruined their day a little bit. I know it would have ruined mine. Nobody wants to find out their grandpappy Lovelace was a murderer. It's kind of a bittersweet one because you'll want to be super excited that they identified a body like so old, but another part of you is like, he's not a good dude. Either way though, when I came across this case, which I came across it when he was originally identified because I follow the DNA Doe Project on Facebook, and I just thought, what a story. We know who Buffalo Cave John Doe was. We know his identity. We know a little bit of his backstory. We know his life was probably taken by somebody in town or one of Agnes's family members who went out searching for him. It's probably what most likely happened. We can't say for sure, but that's what most people lean towards. But there's still one huge mystery in this case, and that is, where is his head? They have excavated that cave to no end and they have never found his head. They've never found anything else. Possibly his head is in another cave, possibly outside of the cave, buried somewhere. Maybe the person responsible kept his head and buried it somewhere close by. It's not out of the ordinary, and it's been done before, where a killer will take one part of the person's body and bury it somewhere else where they know where it is. It's kind of like their little ha-ha to the victim. Does anybody want to have a meet and greet and go search for his head? That was really morbid. So all in all, that is the case of Buffalo Cave John Doe. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments, and all of my social media is in the description of this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye guys.